back to another episode of Crafted by Tim. I'm sorry that I look terrible. I just always look like this. So today we're actually going to be testing out the new foundry and having a look and seeing whether or not we can actually melt something with this. So we have our crucible. This is a crucible that I got off eBay. I think I paid maybe $6 or something. It was a while ago. But it's a 100 milliliter crucible, and I've worked out that to fill up 100 mils or 100 cubic centimeters, I need 840 grams of brass. So we're going to be trying to melt brass today. I've got just over, I think I've got heaps more than what I need, but we're going to be trying it with just almost 900 grams worth of brass. So this is the crucible that we have. I think it's called a alumina oxide crucible, or an aluminium oxide crucible. Very fragile, but they can withstand about 1,700 degrees Celsius, and brass has a melting temperature of about 950, or like just under 950. If you instantaneously try to start melting metal inside of a crucible, it shortens the lifespan of them. So you need to heat them up first, and then you can charge the crucible, aka just fill it with brass. Okay, so something funky just happened with my camera. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but we have some brass that we're going to be using to melt down. So this is one of the pieces that we're going to be using, and there's a few other pieces like this. These are all parts from my old forge, the old forge burner. Oh, how you'll be missed, and oh, how I'm so glad that I managed to replace you with something that's so much better that I can actually melt brass with it. We also have this thing. I have no idea where it came from or what it is, what it used to be, but it weighs about 200 grams. So that's like 200 grams of solid brass. Some old metalwork projects. This is an old little cannon that I made, like a little desktop. Obviously not a real cannon, but you know, just sort of like a little cool thing that I was meant to have a pivot point, and I melted the side. So now we're going to melt it down and hopefully turn it into something useful. And then aside from that, we've got some, I've actually managed to inspire one of my friends to start doing some sort of trench art or bullet art, and he's given me sort of some of his offcuts, just little 22 casings and that sort of stuff. Obviously no empty bullet casings. Western Australia, anyone who doesn't hold a particular license for that particular caliber of shell casing, aka if someone owns a 308 license, they cannot have empty 22 casings, and vice versa. And this is just empty bullet casings. Obviously don't throw in a live bullet because that's bad. You're not going to have a fun time. A few people have sort of expressed their disgust with this law, but it's the law in Western Australia, and unless everybody gets upset about it, it's not going to change anytime soon. To own and possess empty bullet casings, what you need to do is you need to render them as inert, so you can't reload them. Usually that just means by crushing them. I think the last thing that we have is some old pieces from the first time that I tried this, and that didn't work very well. And I figured out why. There's a few different reasons as to why this might not work, and one of the very important ones is overheating it. Brass is made up of two different elements, copper and zinc. Zinc likes to oxidize, and it really likes to oxidize at high temperatures. So you want to keep this as low as towards the lower temperatures as close as possible, because if you have high temperatures, it's more likely to oxidize. The other thing that you can do to help stop it from oxidizing is introduce a little bit of flux, and I'm going to be trying this as well. I'm going to be using borax as my flux. Okay, I think that's everything that I needed to explain. Let's jump in. Crucible will be warmed and then charged. I got to cut up some of these so that they can actually fit inside the crucible. Okay, so I thought that I'd have heaps more time to do this, but it's already really hot in here. Safety glasses. I forgot to mention that I was going to flux it after I put them in, so I've just fluxed it with some borax. Just not very much, just a little bit, because I don't want to melt the inside of the forge, which borax has a tendency of doing. Here I have a mold that will hopefully give me a rod, and basically what it is it's two pieces of 20 by 20 square stock that are welded together along the side, drilled a hole through it, and then I ground out the welds and then welded just one side to this base plate, and then that way hopefully what I will have is one side will be removable, that way the brass should easily be able to come out. And on this side I have just sort of like a standard box sort of thing, just made from mild steel. So, as with a little bit of success comes a little bit of failure. Okay, so it's now the next morning. Yeah, we've got a little bit to look at, a little bit to salvage. And I'd like to start this by saying, I realize now that I didn't do this right. And it's funny because I thought about this afterwards. It was like, sort of after the first pour, I was like, hang on, aren't you meant to let it cool down as well before you charge it? So what you meant to do is you meant to heat it up slowly, let it cool down slowly, and then heat it up again, and then charge it. I did most of that, but not all of it. So, well, you can see what happened. It's funny, I was thinking about it, I was like, nah, it shouldn't matter. It's probably fine. And then, literally 5 minutes later, is that a crack? And then 5 minutes after that, it's like, oh, okay, I'll just pick this up. Nope. Oh, fuck it. But let's actually have a look at some of the molds that we did. Alright, let's take off these. Hey, coming and done. Whoa, whoa. Oh, yes. It actually worked. Yeah. You know what? I'll take it. Yeah, that turned out really, really cool. I'm really happy with that. Now let's try and get out this one, which I have a feeling might be a little bit more difficult. Oh, hang on, no. We got it. Cool. This one didn't turn out as good, as nice and neat and clean. There's probably quite a bit of work that I'm going to have to do to get this to a point where I'm happy with it, especially because I poured it in 2 different layers. You can see those 2 different layers very, very clearly, so I'm not sure whether or not that counts as a crack or an inclusion or something like that. This entire thing was an experiment, and it looks like, for the most part, paid off. Like, it's worked, and geez, that's actually pretty weighty. And I didn't even melt all my brass, so I can go back through and try and remelt this. It's got this weird texture on top, which, from what I understand, is sort of like the beginning stages of oxidization or overheating. I'm not sure which one, but probably both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut it down to the size of bolster I want, and then I'm going to start working on cleaning it up. But for the rest of it, I suppose it'll be to melt it down and turn it into the next ingot. But I got decent results. I'm pretty happy with that. I broke a crucible, and now I'm going to, I guess, get another one. So that's the inside of the foundry. A few bits of brass in there. The foundry seems to hold up okay. You get the light color here and then your darker color here, sort of signifying that the outside might be still a little bit wet. The lid didn't hold up very well. It actually held up better than what I expected, because a lot of people end up with cracks that run straight through the lid all the way through the center. So I'm pretty happy with that too.
I say, Oopie, I'll trade you this baseball for your souvenir bat.
Sure.
What did you learn?
I learned a few things. Importantly, I should do more research. I was under the impression that I knew what I was doing, which you should never be under the impression of. Even if you think you know what you're doing, it doesn't hurt to go back and check to avoid making stupid mistakes that can be kind of costly. Next time I will pay specific attention to making sure that what I'm going to undertake is the right way of doing whatever it is I'm about to do. Alright, well, now onto the grinding and cutting of boards. I ain't gonna lie, it's been a few days. I got a little bit carried away. I just love working with brass so much. It's so much fun. But this is the guard. You remember how we had that crack that was running through it? Yeah, I don't know what happened to it either. It's solid. There's two pins hanging out the back, which are cut down nickel nails. But this is the bolster as of right now, and it looks really good. I need to work on getting all of my angles to be the same. It's not done yet, obviously, but it's been really fun to work with because brass is such a nice, easy material to work with. It's super soft, it moves really easily, it's machinable really easily. It's just a really great material to work with. Brass is really good for things like threads. Some people say it's like self-lubricating, and I suppose it makes sense. Like if you had steel to steel fitting, a steel to brass fitting, and then a brass to brass fitting, the easiest one that will come apart is probably the brass to brass, but even then the steel to brass will probably also still come apart really easily. Anytime that I've come across a steel to brass fitting in the form of like gas bottle attachments and that sort of stuff, I've always been able to take them apart way easier than I have been able to a steel to steel fitting. They always just seem to come apart way easier. Sometimes it looks like it's really badly seized up, but in actuality it's perfectly fine. You can still undo it relatively easily. So that's the guard, or the bolster. I'm a lot of mental blanks today. Probably not a good thing. And this is going to be the thread cap for the knife that I'm currently working on. This is just sort of like a background project. I had no intention that this would work. I had very little hopes. Obviously, I did some research, and I learned a little bit more about casting brass this time than what I did last time. I ended up with way better results. This is the rest of that chunk that I'm using to make this guard. Now, as you can see, it looks like there's a pretty decent crack in there, if it's gonna focus for me. So it looks like there's a relatively decent, like, I don't know, delamination, sort of crack looking thing running all the way through. There's a few running along there or along the bottom. But if you turn it to the side that I cut, you can see that it stops almost instantly there. And it's just sort of pure brass. There's a little bit more of a crack on this side, but it's like mostly solid. And that was really, really encouraging and very exciting to see that this, even though it didn't look great when it first started out, turned out fine. I can't wait to do more with brass. So I'm gonna sort of end this episode pretty well here, but a few things. Do your research, make sure that you know as much as you can about this. Remember, melting metal is dangerous. Please do be careful. I would hate to learn that someone saw this video and they were like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go melt down, you know, a few kilos of brass because I happen to have a few kilos lying around. Something really bad happened. I'd hate to find out that you guys, that one of you guys got yourselves hurt because you saw this video and you thought, yeah, I'll go give that a go without doing more research. But that being said, if you do have the ability to and you do your research, give it a go because it's good fun and, you know, it's a fun material to work with. Same thing when working with it though. Always try and make sure that you're wearing a respirator or, you know, dust mask, whatever. The dust that comes off here isn't inherently good for you, as most metal dust isn't. But this sort of metal dust can lead to metal poisoning and that sort of stuff. So do be careful. I'm really excited about melting more metal, learning more about melting brass, trying a few different things with brass, and also trying to melt a few different metals. I've started collecting some aluminium cans, and I got a bag here full of copper that I would really like to try and melt. I would also like to experiment with making my own alloys. If you enjoyed this video, guys, please consider subscribing as it helps out the channel heaps, and It makes me feel good on the inside, and I need that. And I truly mean this. Stay safe, happy crafting, and as always, cheers. I'll catch you all in the next episode.